It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and the streets of the small town were quiet. The traffic was light, and the air smelled fresh, like the calm before a storm. John, a man in his early 30s, was driving his brand new luxury SUV down Maple Street. The SUV gleamed in the sunlight, its black paint shining like a mirror. John loved this quiet time, the sound of the engine purring under him, and the feeling of the smooth leather seats. He had been working hard all week and now, he was finally enjoying a peaceful drive. He adjusted his sunglasses and smiled. Perfect day for a drive, he thought to himself. The neighborhood kids were playing in their yards, sprinklers spraying water on the green lawns. Everything seemed normal. Calm. Ordinary. But, as always, appearances could be deceiving. As John approached the intersection near Pine Avenue, he noticed a teenage girl riding a small bike toward him. She was moving fast, too fast for the quiet street. Her hair was blowing wildly in the wind, and she was laughing loudly, like she didn't care about the world around her. John's instincts told him something was off. He slowed down slightly and kept an eye on her. The girl, later known as Karen's teen, was known in the neighborhood for being a bit reckless. She loved attention and often ignored basic rules of safety. Today, however, she seemed even bolder than usual. She was weaving slightly, trying to impress someone across the street, and her focus wasn't on controlling the bike at all. John shook his head and muttered, "Just be careful, kid. Don't do anything stupid." He didn't know that within seconds, his life would change completely. The sun reflected off the SUV's polished surface, and John felt a small sense of pride. He had worked hard to buy this car. It wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of his efforts, late nights at work, and sacrifices he had made. He loved driving it, feeling in control of the road, enjoying the calm that life sometimes offered. He glanced at his rearview mirror, checking for other cars. Nothing. Just him and the quiet street. Suddenly, Karen's teen came into full view. She was closer than he thought, riding straight toward the corner where he would soon pass. John's heart skipped a beat. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He braced himself. The girl looked carefree, unaware of the danger ahead. She giggled as she pedaled faster, trying to balance herself on the small bike. John pressed his horn lightly. "Hey! Watch out," he shouted, but she didn't hear him. The wind and laughter drowned out his warning. Time seemed to slow down. John's eyes widened as he realized she wasn't slowing down. His SUV was large and heavy, a fortress on wheels, but it was no match for a sudden crash if someone rode into it. He took a deep breath and prepared for the worst. Just at that moment, the girl's bike wobbled dangerously. Her front wheel hit a small bump in the road. She tried to regain control, but it was too late. The bike tipped forward. John felt a sharp jolt in his chest as instinct screamed at him. He hit the brakes hard, the SUV screeching slightly as the tires gripped the asphalt. The scene was chaotic. A loud metal-on-metal sound echoed through the street. The girl's bike collided with the SUV with a terrible crash. John's heart raced. He slammed on the brakes fully and jumped out of the car, panic and adrenaline mixing in his chest. For a moment, everything was silent. The sun still shone, the sprinklers still sprayed water, and the neighborhood kids still played, completely unaware of the crash that had just occurred. But in that moment, John's world had shifted. He ran toward the girl, fearing the worst. She was on the ground, shocked, her hands trembling as she tried to push herself up. The bike lay twisted beside her, its front wheel bent like a pretzel. John could see her face pale with fear and confusion. "Are you okay?" John shouted, kneeling beside her. The girl looked up, eyes wide and filled with panic. She didn't answer immediately. Her lips trembled. She looked around, as if searching for someone to blame. For a few seconds, it seemed like she didn't even see John, her mind frozen in disbelief at what had just happened. John took a deep breath, trying to calm both himself and her. "It's okay. Just breathe. Are you hurt?" Her response was unexpected. Instead of apologizing or showing concern, she started deflecting blame immediately, saying things like, "It's your fault. You came out of nowhere. Her voice was sharp, defensive, and angry, not scared. John was stunned. He had expected fear, maybe tears. But not this. Her reaction felt wrong, too confident, almost rehearsed. He stepped back slightly, trying to assess the damage. The SUV had a deep scratch on the front bumper, some paint chipped off. The bike was beyond repair. John's chest tightened. This was not going to be simple. As he looked at the girl, a part of him realized that this was just the beginning. The calm, quiet afternoon was over. A storm had arrived, and it wasn't going to pass quickly. He pulled out his phone to take pictures, both for evidence and for protection. He didn't know yet how serious things would get, but he knew one thing: this was going to be a day he would never forget. And as he stood there, watching the girl fumble with her bike and try to hide her panic under a mask of anger, John realized that the real drama hadn't started yet. The neighbors might have thought it was just an accident, but John knew better. The real storm, the confrontation, the lies, and the shocking reactions, was still coming. He took a deep breath, adjusted his sunglasses again, and whispered to himself, "Here we go. This is going to be one crazy ride." Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. It wasn't a loud warning or a scream that made John's heart stop. It was the sound of chaos arriving without warning. 1 second, the street was quiet, peaceful. The next, there was a sharp, twisting metal crunch that made him jump. Time seemed to slow. John's eyes widened as he saw Karen's teen flying forward on her bike. The handlebars twisted like a broken branch, and her wheels wobbled uncontrollably. In that moment, John felt a strange mix of fear and disbelief. He had seen accidents before, but never like this. The teen's hands flailed in the air, her face frozen in a mix of panic and disbelief. John could see her lips move, but no sound came out at first. The bike was a blur of silver and black, and before he could react, it slammed into the front of his luxury SUV with a bone-jarring clang. John's hands gripped the steering wheel instinctively, even though the SUV had already stopped moving. His knuckles turned white. For a second, everything around him seemed unreal: the sunlight sparkling off the SUV, the green lawns, the sprinklers spraying water, all frozen in a frame of sudden chaos. He jumped out of the car, heart pounding. The sound of metal scraping against metal still echoed in his ears. His eyes darted between the bent bike and the girl on the ground. She was on her knees, shaking, looking more shocked than hurt. But her wide, panicked eyes held something else too: confusion, fear, and a hint of anger. John took a cautious step closer. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady but tight. The girl froze, staring at him like she couldn't process what had just happened. Then, almost immediately, her expression shifted. Fear disappeared, replaced by a defiant, defensive glare. "It's not my fault," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You came out of nowhere." John's jaw tightened. He had expected fear. Tears. Maybe even a quiet apology. Not this. Her sudden aggression felt strange, wrong even. The calm he had enjoyed moments ago was gone, replaced by a tension that made the hair on his arms stand up. He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Look," he said, pointing to the bike and the damage on his SUV, "you hit my car. You need to admit that and be careful." The girl's eyes darted around, as if looking for backup. Then she muttered something under her breath and quickly added, "It's not that bad. It's just a scratch." John's eyes narrowed. Just a scratch? The SUV's front bumper had a long, deep gash now, metal bent and paint peeled. This was more than just a scratch. He knelt down to inspect the bike. The front wheel was bent like it belonged to another planet, the frame twisted, and the chain hung loose. There was no way it could ride again without major repairs. He shook his head. "I need your name and number," John said calmly, pulling out his phone. "We can sort this out. But I need details." Instead of cooperating, the teen stomped her foot and looked away, arms crossed. She wasn't scared anymore. She was angry and defensive, and John realized something unsettling: she wasn't going to admit fault easily. Then, in a sudden burst, her mother appeared from across the street. She ran over, her face red with anger. What happened here? Are you accusing my child? She demanded, her voice sharp. John could feel the tension spike immediately. I'm just trying to handle the accident, John replied, staying calm. She hit my car. It's damaged, and we need to exchange information. The woman scoffed, shaking her head. She's a good girl. You must be exaggerating. This is ridiculous. John's patience began to stretch thin, but he forced himself to remain composed. He pulled out his phone and started taking photos, evidence for later. The twisted bike, the scratch on the SUV, and even the girl's defensive stance. Every detail mattered. Meanwhile, the teen started pacing, muttering excuses under her breath, trying to minimize the situation. John noticed the way she glanced at neighbors watching silently from their yards, almost like she hoped someone would take her side. But the most unnerving thing? Her reaction, calm 1 second, panicked the next, then angry and defiant, was unpredictable. John realized that handling this would be more complicated than he thought. This wasn't just about a crash anymore. It was about control, blame, and a confrontation he hadn't expected. He straightened up, phone still in hand. I'm calling the police, he said firmly. The teen froze again. Her eyes widened. Her mother's face paled slightly, but she tried to mask it with anger. The air around them felt heavy, charged. The neighbors started whispering, some stepping closer to see what was happening. John took a step back, breathing slowly. He knew the real chaos was about to begin. The accident was just the start. The lies, the confrontation, and the shocking reactions were waiting just around the corner. For a moment, he allowed himself a tiny thought, this is going to be one day I'll never forget. And deep down, he knew that the calm of the morning was gone forever. The storm had arrived. It wasn't the sound of the crash or the bent metal that made John take a step back. It was the silence that followed, heavy and tense, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The girl, Karen's teen, was still on her knees beside the twisted bike, staring at the SUV like she couldn't believe what she had done. But her eyes were not filled with tears. They were sharp, defensive, calculating. John took a slow breath. He knelt beside her, careful not to seem threatening. Are you hurt? He asked. For a moment, she didn't answer. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. Then, almost like a switch flipped, she sat up straighter and looked him in the eye. It's not my fault, she shouted, her voice cracking between anger and fear. You came out of nowhere. This is your problem, not mine. John froze. He had expected tears, maybe a shaky apology, but not this. Her words were sharp, defensive, almost rehearsed. He could feel the tension around them tightening, like the air itself was pulling him into a storm. Look, John said carefully, trying to remain calm, the car is scratched, your bike is destroyed. We need to handle this properly. We need names, numbers, and a clear story. The teen rolled her eyes and scoffed. Why are you acting like I did something wrong? It's just a scratch. You're overreacting. John's jaw tightened. This wasn't just denial, it was aggression masked as innocence. He could feel his patience being tested, stretched thinner with every second. The neighbors, who had started gathering at a safe distance, whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads. Others pulled out their phones, curious about the unfolding drama. Then came the next twist. Karen's teen's mother stormed forward, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Her face was red, her voice sharp. What's going on here? Are you accusing my child of something? She demanded. John kept his tone calm but firm. Ma'am, your daughter hit my car. It's damaged, and we need to exchange information. The mother's face twisted with disbelief. She's a good girl. You must be exaggerating. John pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, evidence. The scratch on the SUV, the twisted bike, the girl's tense stance, all captured for the future. He could feel the mother's gaze burning into him. She wasn't listening, she was strategizing. The teen, meanwhile, had regained her composure. She stood up, brushing herself off, and crossed her arms. See, she said to her mother. I told you. Nothing happened. He's just trying to make a big deal. John's heart sank slightly. This was turning into more than just an accident, it was now a battle of control and blame. The girl's attitude was shifting unpredictably. One moment, she was scared, the next, defensive, now, she was bold and confrontational. He took a deep breath. I understand you're upset, but this isn't about anger. It's about responsibility. Someone has to take care of the damage, and we need to do it the right way. The teen's mother scoffed. Responsibility? My daughter is responsible for nothing. You are just trying to ruin her day. The teen glared at John, then looked at her mother for support. It was clear she had learned from her: deflect blame, act confident, and hope the other side backs down. John felt a chill. He knew he was dealing with more than a simple accident. He stepped closer, keeping his voice calm but firm. Listen, I don't want this to get worse. We can fix this if we cooperate. But lying or blaming me will only make it harder. For a moment, the teen's confident mask faltered. Her eyes flickered toward the SUV, then to the neighbors, and finally back at John. There was a hint of doubt, a flicker of fear under the defiance. But she quickly covered it with anger again. You can't do anything to me, she shouted, pointing at him. You think you can scare me? My parents will handle this. John shook his head silently, realizing the challenge ahead. This wasn't just an accident, it was a storm waiting to explode. The teen's words, her mother's anger, and the gathering crowd created a pressure cooker of tension. He stepped back slightly, taking a slow breath. He knew what he had to do next: call the authorities. But even as he reached for his phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real confrontation, truth versus lies, honesty versus arrogance, was about to begin. And deep down, he knew one thing: the next few minutes would reveal everything about Karen's teen, the real attitude hiding under her bold, defensive front. The calm after the crash was gone. The first words had been spoken, and the storm had only just begun. The street had fallen into a strange, uneasy silence. Not quiet like before the crash, but heavy with tension, the kind that makes every passerby stop and look. John could feel it in the air, like the calm had been replaced by a thick, invisible fog of anticipation. The teen's defiance and her mother's anger were fueling something bigger than the accident itself. John took a step back and glanced around. Neighbors had started to peek from their windows and doorways, whispering to each other. A few had come closer, trying not to seem involved, but their curious eyes were impossible to ignore. He could feel the weight of their attention, like the entire block was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Karen's teen had now stood tall, her hands on her hips, glaring at John with a mixture of fear and arrogance. You think you can ruin my day? She spat, her voice sharp. My mom is going to fix this. You'll see. Her mother, standing beside her like a shield, nodded aggressively. Exactly. You can't accuse her of anything. She didn't mean it, she's just a kid. John's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about scratches anymore. It was about control, ego, and pride. He could see the way they had rehearsed this, the teen deflecting blame, the mother backing her up, trying to intimidate him. He realized that if he didn't handle this carefully, it could spiral out of control fast. He pulled out his phone again, taking photos from multiple angles. The bent bike, the scratched SUV, the teen's defensive posture, her mother's angry face, all captured. Every detail mattered. This wasn't just insurance evidence, it was proof against lies. Look, John said calmly, keeping his voice steady despite the tension, we can solve this quietly if we cooperate. But if you keep yelling, blaming me, or lying, it will only make things worse. The teen scoffed, rolling her eyes. You're acting like you're the police. Relax. Nothing happened. John shook his head, feeling the frustration building. Nothing happened? Look at this. He gestured to the damaged SUV and the bent bike. You crashed into my car. This isn't just a game. Her mother stepped forward, her voice louder now, trying to dominate the situation. You're just trying to humiliate her. You think you're better than us? You're the one causing trouble. John could feel the tension crackling like electricity. Each word, each gesture, added fuel to the fire. He realized the crowd of neighbors around them was now a silent jury, eyes wide, waiting for the next explosion. Then the teen did something unexpected. She suddenly pointed at John, her voice trembling slightly. I wasn't going that fast. It's your fault. Her words were a weak attempt at deflection. John noticed the tiny flicker of guilt in her eyes, quickly hidden behind anger. This was the first real sign that she knew she couldn't entirely escape responsibility. John breathed slowly, keeping his voice calm but firm. We're not here to argue about who's faster or who's at fault. We need facts. I've taken pictures. We can wait for the police. They'll sort this out. The teen's mother frowned. Police? You're overreacting. My daughter didn't do anything. John's patience snapped just slightly, but he forced himself to remain composed. He could feel the adrenaline pumping in his veins. The escalation was real, and he knew he had to stand his ground. Ma'am, this isn't personal. This is about responsibility. If we don't handle this now, it could get worse. Trust me, you'll want the police involved before this spirals. The teen's face changed. The bold, defiant mask faltered for a moment. Her fingers fiddled with the bike chain, and her eyes darted to the neighbors, as if seeking a silent witness. But then she straightened up, forcing her anger back to the surface. John could see it clearly now. The teen and her mother were a team, trying to intimidate him into backing down. But he wasn't going anywhere. The escalation had begun, and there was no turning back. He glanced at the SUV, the damage glaring in the sunlight, and felt a wave of resolve. This wasn't just about scratches or a broken bike, it was about standing firm, staying calm, and letting the truth take its course. And somewhere deep down, he knew the moment the police arrived, the real drama, the shocking reactions, the lies unraveling, the confrontation that would leave everyone speechless, was about to begin. The calm of the street was gone. The tension had escalated beyond simple anger. Now, it was a storm waiting to explode. The air felt heavy, thick with anger and silent judgment. John's hand hovered over his phone, and for a moment, he didn't dial. He didn't want to provoke the teen or her mother any further, but the longer he waited, the more obvious it became. This situation was spiraling out of control. Karen's teen was now pacing back and forth, muttering under her breath, her anger building like a storm cloud ready to burst. Her mother's voice cut sharply through the tension, scolding, warning, and trying to intimidate John all at once. You're trying to embarrass us. Stop pretending you're the victim. John's patience had limits, but his strategy was simple: stay calm, stay firm, and document everything. He finally lifted his phone and dialed the police. The moment he pressed the call button, the teen froze. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, her defiant mask wavered. She glanced at her mother, panic flickering across her face, though her words still tried to hide it. I didn't. Her mother stepped closer, trying to cover the signs of panic with anger. We don't need the police. You're making a big deal out of nothing. John stayed calm, speaking quietly into the phone, giving his location and a brief explanation. Yes, officer. There's been an accident. A teen on a bike hit my SUV. The bike is damaged, the car is scratched. We need assistance with information and witness statements. Even as he spoke, he could feel the tension in the street multiply. Neighbors now lingered closer, some whispering, some recording on their phones. The teen's panic grew, her movements jittery. She kept looking around, calculating, wondering if someone would side with her. John noticed the subtle signs of fear. Her hands were shaking slightly, her foot tapping nervously. Even her mother's anger was now mixed with a hint of uncertainty. The police call had shifted the power balance, and both of them knew it. Why would you call the police? The teen finally burst out, her voice trembling despite her anger. John took a calm breath. Because this isn't just about scratches. It's about responsibility. And right now, we need someone impartial to sort out the truth. Her mother's face turned red with frustration. She glanced around, clearly aware that neighbors were watching, that any wrong move could be documented. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, almost to herself. Meanwhile, the teen began pacing faster, muttering excuses and blaming John again. "It's your fault. You were too fast. You shouldn't have." John ignored the words. He focused on the phone call, repeating facts, keeping his tone level. He knew the teen's words were just noise, distractions to shift blame. The police would see the evidence, the photos, and the witnesses. In the tense silence between his sentences, John noticed something chilling. The teen's eyes darted around, searching for allies among the neighbors. But everyone was silent. Everyone was watching. She realized she couldn't manipulate the crowd. Then, as if on cue, the teen's mother stepped closer to shield her daughter, whispering in her ear, trying to coach her, "Just stay calm. Pretend it's not a big deal. Don't let him scare you." John felt a shiver. The combination of fear, anger, and desperation in their behavior told him this was bigger than a simple accident. He also knew the police would be the turning point, the moment where truth would start to cut through lies. Finally, the officer on the line confirmed they were on their way. John ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket, and turned to the teen and her mother. "They're coming," he said quietly, watching their reactions closely. For the teen, it was a mixture of shock, panic, and faint regret, quickly masked by defiance. For the mother, it was fury tinged with fear, a recognition that the truth might soon surface. The street seemed to hold its breath again, waiting. John knew the next few minutes would determine everything. How the teen would react when the police arrived, how her lies would unravel, and the shock that would follow, it was all about to play out in real time. The calm, the excuses, and the defiance were over. The real drama was coming, and there was no way to stop it. The sound of distant sirens broke the heavy silence on the street. At first, it was faint, barely audible over the hum of the neighborhood. But with each passing second, the wail grew louder, closer, undeniable. Karen's teen froze mid-step, her eyes widening like saucers. She had been pacing, trying to act bold, but now something inside her shifted. That confident mask cracked ever so slightly. Her hands tightened into fists. She glanced at her mother, as if silently pleading for guidance. Her mother, normally loud and unshakable, suddenly seemed smaller. She straightened, trying to appear calm, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her. The mother and daughter exchanged a quick glance, panic hidden behind defiance. John watched them carefully, his own heartbeat quickening. This was the moment everything would change. The police weren't just another witness, they were authority, impartial and undeniable. He knew the teen's act of defiance would face its first real test. A police car turned onto the street, lights flashing silently in the bright afternoon. The vehicle slowed, then stopped a few meters from the crash scene. Two officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, scanning the crowd, taking in the damage, the SUV, the twisted bike, and the tense faces of the teen and her mother. Karen's teen's face went pale. She stumbled slightly backward, as if trying to hide, but the officer's eyes were already on her. She muttered something under her breath, her voice shaking. I didn't do anything." One officer approached John first. "Sir, can you tell us what happened?" John nodded, keeping his voice steady. "A teen on a bike crashed into my SUV. The bike is destroyed, the car is scratched, and we've been trying to sort this out, but they're refusing to cooperate." The officer's gaze then shifted to the teen. "Ma'am, can you tell me your side of the story?" Karen's teen opened her mouth, but words didn't come out at first. She tried to look calm, confident, but her hands were trembling, and her eyes darted nervously toward her mother and the neighbors. It wasn't my fault," she stammered, her voice faltering. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly noticing her hesitation. John quietly stepped aside, letting the evidence speak for itself, photos on his phone, the bent bike, the scratched SUV, and the silent neighbors who had witnessed the events. Suddenly, the teen's panic grew. Her earlier defiance collided with the reality of authority. She stumbled over her words, trying to blame John again, trying to cover herself, but the officer didn't flinch. "You're shaking," the officer said calmly. Do you realize how serious this is? We need honesty. Right now. Her mother tried to intervene, stepping forward, her voice rising. She's just a kid. You can't blame her for. The officer cut her off with a firm gesture. Step back, ma'am. We're here to understand the facts, not to be interrupted. For the first time, both mother and daughter went silent. The street felt still, like the world itself was watching. John could see the panic in the teen's eyes as the truth began to dawn on her. There was no more hiding, no more deflection. The officer then asked for the teen's identification and her mother's. John watched quietly as the teen's hands shook slightly while handing over her ID, realizing her lies and excuses could no longer protect her. In that moment, the tension in the air was almost unbearable. The neighbors leaned closer, some whispering, some recording the unfolding drama. The teen's defiance had crumbled into fear and disbelief. John took a deep breath, silently relieved. The storm was hitting its peak, the truth was coming out, the lies were unraveling, and the shocking reactions he had anticipated were finally unfolding. The officer nodded, giving John a small, reassuring glance. We'll handle this. Sit tight. Karen's teen's face went from shock to terror to anger in a few seconds. Her mother's posture slumped slightly, the realization of consequences dawning on her. The street, once quiet and ordinary, had transformed into a stage for a confrontation that neither family would ever forget. And deep down, John knew, the shocking reactions, the accountability, and the drama were just beginning. The calm of the day was gone forever. The police had arrived, and the truth would no longer wait. The street was silent, but the air felt electric, every neighbor holding their breath, every person frozen in anticipation. Karen's teen stood rigid, her fingers trembling as she gripped the handlebars of her destroyed bike. Her mother's face was red, a mix of anger, panic, and disbelief. The quiet hum of the afternoon was gone, replaced by tension that crackled like static. John watched from a few steps back, his SUV gleaming under the sun, a jagged scratch running along the bumper like a permanent reminder of the chaos that had erupted. He felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The police had arrived, and now the truth would finally come out. The officer spoke calmly but firmly, his voice cutting through the thick tension. We have statements, evidence, and witnesses. Ma'am, he said, looking at the teen, it's clear what happened. You are responsible for the damage to the vehicle, and there are consequences you cannot avoid. The teen's confident mask shattered completely. Her eyes widened in horror as the reality sank in. No, I didn't mean, she stammered, her voice faltering. Her mother gasped audibly, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't find words. She stepped forward, trying to argue, but the officer raised a hand, silencing her instantly. Step back. This isn't up for debate. The neighbors, who had been silently observing, now whispered to each other, some shaking their heads, some recording the moment. The teen's panic grew. She tried to compose herself, her lips trembling as she looked at John, perhaps hoping he would intervene, but he only stayed calm, letting the evidence speak. The officer continued, there will be a fine, possible restrictions on your bike riding, and you are required to compensate for the damage to the vehicle. This is standard procedure, and it cannot be ignored. The teen's reaction was immediate and shocking. She dropped to her knees, covering her face with her hands. I didn't mean to, she cried, the bravado completely gone. Her mother's shoulders slumped, the anger replaced with the realization that they had misjudged the situation entirely. She muttered under her breath, clearly embarrassed, I can't believe this. John felt a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. It had been a tense, exhausting afternoon, and finally, justice, or at least accountability, had come. The teen's reaction, the mother's shock, and the silence of the neighbors made it all feel surreal, like a scene from a movie. The officer handed the teen a document, explaining the process she would need to follow. The teen barely looked at it, still shaking, still overwhelmed by the consequences she had tried so desperately to avoid. John stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. This could have been avoided, he said softly, looking at the teen. It's not just about the car or the bike, it's about responsibility. I hope you understand that now. The teen's eyes met his for the first time, filled with shame and realization. She nodded slightly, the words failing her. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. The mother finally muttered something under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. We messed up. John took a deep breath, letting the tension drain slightly. He looked at the street, at the neighbors still watching, and realized that the calm of the day would never return. The incident would be talked about for weeks, a story of recklessness, confrontation, and accountability. The teen, humbled and shaken, finally began to understand the weight of her actions. Her mother stayed close, silently accepting that this was a lesson she couldn't protect her daughter from. As the police prepared to leave, John climbed back into his SUV. The engine hummed beneath him, a comforting reminder of control and calm after the storm. He looked at the teen and her mother one last time. They had been shocked, exposed, and forced to face reality, just as the title of the day promised, reactions that no one would forget. And as he drove away slowly, the sun glinting off the SUV's scratched surface, John thought to himself, one careless moment had changed everything, but in the end, truth always finds its way. The street returned to quiet, the storm had passed, and the lesson was clear: actions have consequences, and no amount of defiance could hide them.